Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today we're going to talk about the man Ramsey Campbell, who was dubbed Britain's answer to Stephen King. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, as part of my kind of ongoing series of British horror authors, today we're going to look at Ramsey Campbell. He's very much celebrated, award-winning author, and he's basically been writing for over 5 decades. He's got over 30 novels, hundreds of short stories, also novellas, and yeah, as I said, he's highly celebrated, but he's never quite reached the heights of someone like Stephen King, even though that's what someone said. He's pretty much like Stephen King. And in my opinion, yeah, he's not like Stephen King, and he's kind of, oh, his kid's next door, sorry, they just arrived on cue. But anyway, yeah, he's basically not in the league of Stephen King, in my opinion. There's some people that love him, some people that can never get into his writing. So what I want to do in this video is I want to look at some of the influences in his life and in his writing, and I also want to recommend to you how the best way that you can go about starting to read Ramsey Campbell, because it can be quite daunting, as I've discovered. Yeah, so let's continue. Okay, there's a couple of things that influenced Ramsey Campbell, the writer. I just want to talk about them very briefly. First of all, Lovecraft. In his early days, he wrote a lot of very kind of Lovecraftian work. It was only later on that he really found his own voice, his own distinct voice, but he always takes a nod to Lovecraft. And I think of Algernon Blackwood, there are other authors as well that really influenced him, but he's got a very distinctive original voice. And unfortunately this also turns some people off. His writing is often very dreamlike. It's very slow, it's very atmospheric, and it's very dense compared to some of the other authors I've been talking about lately. That's James Herbert and can't remember, well, Clive Barker obviously, and then there's also Graham Masterton. Those are the 3 other horror authors from Britain that I've spoken about. Ramsey Campbell is very dense and very slow burn, very atmospheric. And I just think that a lot of people can't get into his prose and they struggle with it. It's not for everyone. But I do think that the best way to get into him is to explore his short stories. And he's got hundreds and hundreds of short stories in a lot of anthologies of his own and of mixed anthologies. And he's written some great short stories, which we're going to talk about towards the end of the video. Another huge influence on Ramsey Campbell's writing was that he had a very traumatic childhood. His mother and father were estranged. His mother was schizophrenic, and she was paranoid, and she became increasingly paranoid, put a lot of pressure on the young Ramsey Campbell. They had a very difficult life, and in his own words, with his dad, didn't see him for 20 years, and the only time he saw him was when he's dying. So yeah, and this influenced in particular one book which I'm going to talk about just now. That is probably my favorite Ramsey Campbell book. It didn't get quite 4 stars, which tells me a little bit, maybe tells you a little bit how I feel about this author, but he's a good writer and I'm still going to give him a chance. When I show off my collection, I'll tell you why. Okay, first of all I want to show off 2 novels that I found all over the internet are a very good place to start with Ramsey Campbell. And the first one is The Hungry Moon. Everyone talks about this, and I have not read this, and it sounds very, very interesting, unlike the other ones I've read. And this talks about on the Black Moors of northern England, in the shadow of a modern missile base, a band of druids enact their pagan rites. Rites which unleash a nightmare vision of 2 unspeakable horrors, ancient supernatural evil and nuclear catastrophe. And from what I understand, there's also a fundamental religion where this person goes into these caves, and this fundamental Christianity religion always gets to me. I'm not actually sure whether I enjoy it as a horror trope. Some of you maybe do, but whoever goes in that cave comes out a completely different monster, and things get quite evil and hectic with the town. Now, yeah, I'm actually going to try this out quite soon, maybe in the next 2-3 months. Let me know if you read it, let me know what you think, but that is The Hungry Moon. And one thing about Ramsey Campbell I really enjoy is his covers. Very 70s and 80s vintage horror covers. So how's this? Yeah. Okay, Ryan, the next book that I have not read and I'm meaning to get to because it's been highly recommended on Goodreads is The Grin of the Dark. Now, this plot and the premise is a little bit too complicated to just memorize, so let me just read a little bit of the back. Tubby Thackeray's stage routines, yes, this is all about plays and madness, were so deranged that members of his audience were said to have died or lost their minds. When Simon Lester is commissioned to write a book about this notorious music hall clown and his riotous silent companions, his research plunges him into a nightmare realm where genius, buffoonery and madness converge. Okay, yeah, so I can imagine it's about the theatre, about clowns, about madness. But yeah, I don't know how much I'm keen about this. I think The Hungry Moon sounds better, but let me know if you read this down in the comments below. That is The Grin of the Dark. Okay, and the final book that I have not read that's in my collection is Obsession. Now this actually sounded very strangely like Toady by Mark Morris. Let me just read the back so you get an idea. 4 kids burn with adolescent frustration in a dead-end seaside town. In a bid to change their mundane lives, they form a secret, unearthly pact, each one calling on the powers of a dark supernatural force, with its wish to be fulfilled. But what begins as an innocent game soon becomes a chilling nightmare. Their desires are granted, but for a horrifying price. So yeah, as soon as I read that, I just felt Mark Morris Toady. But I'm sure this is completely different, and that is Obsession. Okay, now for the books that I have read, and I'm going to talk about them in order in terms of the one I least enjoyed, one I most enjoyed, and the one that I least enjoyed. I've looked everywhere. I know that I have it somewhere, but I cannot find it, so sorry, it's just going to be up here. And that is The Long Lost by Ramsey Campbell. Now, I found this kind of dull. I know it's about a couple and a relative, and it's kind of, they get caught up with this relative who actually saves them, but they get caught up in this web of evil, something spun from her hair. And I found it very slow, very dull characters. I somehow managed to finish it and I gave it 2 stars. Once again, at the moment I don't think I'm in tune with Ramsey Campbell as much as I am with the other authors that I'm going to put at the end of the video. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be. But I'm going to talk about at the end of the video the kind of things that you might really like by him. Okay, the next book that is definitely better, and I would say this is closer to 3.5 stars, but maybe I was a bit miserly when I gave this rating. I might need to look at it again because it was a fun read. And that is A Doll Who Ate His Mother. And I think one of the problems that I might be judging the book by the cover. I need to judge the book on its own merits, but when you look at the cover, the title and the awesome cover and the visual don't go with what's in the book. There's no doll who eats a mother. Yeah, there's no baby, there's no baby climbing out of a drain pipe or whatever the hell this is with blood. So yeah, I was a little bit disillusioned afterwards. I kind of was hoping for something like a cover where a doll eats its mother. But what does happen is that at the beginning is a brother and sister who are driving and they have an accident, and to put it just short and sweet, the brother dies. He's in the passenger seat, And when the sister comes to, finds out, yeah, the brother has died, but the problem is, the brother's missing an arm. Someone went off with his arm. And so we learn about this serial killer, who is pretty damn messed up. And just be warned, he chows on the cats and dogs in the area. He's kind of deranged, and there's a bit of a manhunt and stuff going on. So I did enjoy the story, but as I said, I think I was just disillusioned because it's got nothing to do with this cover. That is, the doll who ate his mother. Okay, then we got a book that I've reviewed on this channel, and I spoke about quite briefly, and that is The Face That Must Die. Now look at this cover, a gory frickin' cover. Now I actually only gave it 3 stars, and the more I think about it, maybe I could have very well given it 4. And I'm going to read just a little bit of my Goodreads, what I talked about on Goodreads, what I said on Goodreads, and that is an interesting look inside the mind of a delusional, paranoid, homophobic serial killer, set in a very dull, dreary, bleak 70s Liverpool. Okay, and then being inside Horrortube's mind, messed up head, was the best thing about this novel for me. The problem was the slow pacing in his characters. I far prefer his short fiction. Okay, so before we go, at the beginning of this video I spoke about how messed up his childhood was, and how Ramsey Campbell talked about his estranged parents and about his schizophrenic mother. In this particular story, it's a revised version I believe, he gives a preface, he gives an introduction, and it is almost as good as the story. It is brilliant. And he talks very frankly in the introduction about his childhood, about his family, about growing up in that situation, and about how it relates to this particular story. So I actually found that flippin' interesting. In addition to that, another thing that I did not mention at the beginning, another huge influence in terms of his writing, but particularly in terms of this book, is the setting. He grew up in Liverpool, post-World War, kind of Depression era, and the setting is very bleak, it's very dark, it's very dull. There's a sense of depression, and I think that heavy, loaded feeling of depression gets to people, that they can't get through that with his writing. And that's why I'm going to go now into his short stories. And that's the best way to discover this author, is read his short stories. He basically has written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of short stories, and if you familiarize yourselves with his writing, you can feel if this is a man for you or not. So yeah, let's talk about that. Okay, what I've got next is a whole bunch of awesome books with his short stories. One where he is in an anthology, 2 where he is in an anthology that he edited, 3 a collection of his own short stories. So let's get going. Okay, just take note that this is not in order of publication date. First one I'm talking about is Uncanny Banquet, and it's quite interesting. At the back it talks about how he actually inspired such talents as Clive Barker and Stephen King. And yeah, I love this cover. I love all the covers to follow, and short story is the way to go. Okay, next up we have Cold Print. Now look at this cover. I don't know what you call this, those things that have poisonous teeth and they bite you. Excuse the knocking from next door, it's getting noisier and noisier. There's nothing I can do about it, I'm sorry. Oh, Komodo dragon. Apparently what they do is they bite onto their prey, and the prey gets, basically there's all this bacteria, and the prey can run away, but the bacteria breaks them down eventually, and then the Komodo can just follow the trail and eat them at their leisure. Komodo dragon, that's what it looks like anyway. Okay, next up we have Scared Stiff. Tales of Sex and Death. Introduction by Clive Barker. And this is perfect for Clive Barker, Tales of Sex and Death, because a lot of his stories are about very kinky and messed up sex and horrible deaths, and just, he's a perfect man to do this. I think I've delved into this at some stage, I can't remember, but I'm definitely going to give this a reread soon. And look at the cover. Next up we have Dark Forces, and I do remember the Ramsey Campbell story from this book, and that is called The Breed. And that was incredibly creepy, very dark, very bloody, and it's an example of how it's so good before you get into writing or reading an author, or thinking, do I want to read this author? If they write short stories, try one of them first. Get used to the writing style and see if you enjoy it or not. So yeah, that is Dark Forces. Okay, and the next one, he was editor of this book as well as having an entry, and that is the New Terror Omnibus. Bumper collection of 37 terrifying tales with Stephen King once again, Robert Aikman, Robert Bloch, and many more, edited by Ramsey Campbell. Okay, and finally we have my favourite, or possibly my favourite short story, collections of all time, and I just love the cover as well, and that is 65 Great Spine Chillers. Now this has Stephen King, Lovecraft, Algernon Blackwood, Roald Dahl. It even has, just wait a second, yeah, Ramsey Campbell and Sir Winston Churchill wrote a story that is in this book, as well as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a story that's in this book. Yeah, this is a phenomenal book, and I highly recommend it. But we're getting away from the topic now, aren't we? Okay everyone, before we go and I give my little conclusion at the end, just want to let you know that I'm going to be posting up the videos that I made on James Herbert and who was the other one, Graham Masterson, so you can check them up and compare and have a look and see what I thought about them. Look, it's not that I dislike this author, Ramsey Campbell. I think maybe I just haven't found the right novel yet from my collection. And if you think one of the ones that I have not read that I will enjoy, let me know in the comments below, or anyone that you've read and you really enjoyed. And as I said, I think the best way to get into an author is to look at their short stories. That even includes Stephen King. It includes Clive Barker, Books of Blood. You can get a feel for their writing, get a feel for what they do, and you can say, hey, this is not for me. But I think it's the best way to get into it. And yeah, take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.